the goal of life. Realize God, that is the goal of life. That is the goal of life. Realize God, that is the goal of life. Realize God, that is the goal of life. Not faith, not peace, that is the goal of life. Om Asato Masad Agamaya Tamaso Omaham Jyotirgamaya Mrityormam Amrita Gamaya Avir Havir Maedhi Rudra Yate Dakshinam Mukha Te Namaham Pahinityam. Om, lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness unto light. Lead us from death to immortality. Reach us through and through ourselves, and evermore protect us from ignorance by thy sweet, compassionate face. So my subject this morning is religion is realization. What we have here is a good Vedantic definition of religion. In common parlance, at least in Western traditions, a religion is a body of beliefs and practices associated with a supernatural personal God, founded by some one particular great person, an incarnation or a prophet. And his words are enshrined for posterity in some particular sacred book or scripture. And the doctrines and dogmas in those scriptures are formulated and preached by theologians in seminaries. And they're taught in churches on a Sunday morning, preached by ministers and rabbis to a congregation of believers. And their ideal is to understand the faith and to be true to the faith and to live good lives and to do good works. This conventional idea of a religion. And such religions are very crucially important in the lives of persons and in the intersubjective culture and in the society for several reasons. First of all, of course, it gives the common man some meaning, some purpose, some higher values in life. It gives them a worldview, a paradigm, a kind of a meta-narrative that enables one to reinterpret all of their experiences in life, directing them to some higher ideal. So too, religion is, in particular, in its theology, it provides an important grounding and justification for morality and ethics. See, people can be moral, and people are by nature good, and people can be moral and good without religion. But if you want to have a firm basis, we cannot establish the principles of morality and ethics by common sense or by intuition or by reason. And therefore we need religion, we need revelation for a justification. So too, a conventional religion serves a great purpose. That is, it has a horizontal influence on society and culture. It brings men together. It's a binding force. In fact, there's no greater, stronger binding force than the beliefs in soul, God in religion. What do they say? They say blood, and family, blood, and soil, and religion. These are the great binding factors that bring all men together. So religion serves that purpose. Religion encourages the worshipers to be altruistic. It makes good men. It makes good men better. It inspires men to do good works. But such a conventional religion, as we're talking here about kind of a legitimate but exoteric conception of religion, although it makes men good, it doesn't make saints. It doesn't make sages. It doesn't make mystics. And it does not liberate us from the wheel of birth and death. For that, we need to go deeper into the interior of religion. Religion has an outside and it has an inside. That is, we need to look deeper into the esoteric dimensions of the interior of religion. In every religion, there are individuals who are not content with faith and with good works, and who long to have some personal, immediate, direct experience of soul, God, and religion. They take their beliefs very seriously. They want to experience, they want to see things for themselves. And in this spirit, they will seek out some spiritual master or some religious advisor, and from them they get some personal instructions on how to lead an interior life, a contemplative life. And they will tend to withdraw from the world and to begin an inward journey and an inward quest. And maybe they join some secret society, or they retire into live in solitude, or seek out others of like similar aspirations and live in a monastery or a convent. And in the Western tradition, such people were called mystics. And mystics are those who have a hunger and a thirst for realizing the one, for realizing the absolute, and who dedicate themselves to maybe some esoteric alchemical process of self-purification, or certainly purgation, and of purifying themselves, and then of cultivating spiritual heavenly virtues, and undergoing a whole process of sanctification. These are mystics. In the Eastern tradition, they had a similar, the Eastern tradition, of course, they're called yogis. In Eastern tradition, this was taught by spiritual teachers. They're called the gurus. that is a guru coming out of a long lineage of spiritual teachers, traditional, often by word of mouth, teaching individual disciples who form a close inner circle of initiated disciples, passing on the teachings of different kinds of yoga practice, that is practices to realize these higher truths. And this whole yoga tradition, like the mystic tradition, it's in contrast with a more conventional, legitimate religion, which is more horizontal, whereas this mystic tradition is vertical. It's all about upward movement. It's all about seeking transformation. It's all the mystic and the yogi are not content with becoming good and better and better. They don't want to become a better caterpillar. You want to become a transformation, complete transformation into a butterfly. And so it's that which marks this mystic tradition. Of course, mysticism is the fountainhead of all religions. We go back to the very beginning. It's this mysticism, and it's religion. Sometimes people ask the question of Vedanta, is Vedanta a religion? And a simple answer to that question, of course, is no. It's not a sectarian religion that believes in a supernatural personal God with a particular name and form who lives apart from this world. It does not have any one particular founder or one particular sacred book at all. So in that sense, we can't really call it a religion. And yet it is religion. It's the essence of religion in the original meaning of the term religion, coming from the Latin word religare, means to reconnect ourselves with our own higher self, to reconnect with God, to become one with God, to become one with the universe. That's the purpose, the original purpose of religion. And so in that real true sense, Vedanta is the universal religion, is the essential teachings of religion. So our subject here is religion, and religion is realization. Let's look at the word realization. By realization, we can refer to the goal and to the process of religion. The goal of religion is enlightenment. That is to say, when we say religion is realization, what we mean is that the whole essence, the whole point, the whole purpose, the whole meaning of religion, the end point, the goal to which we're working towards, is to achieve the highest knowledge, the knowledge of ultimate reality. And if we can visualize a great mountain, and on the mountain, all of humanity is ascending that mountain, and at the top of the mountain there is the immortal city of Brahman. And all people are striving in their own ways, climbing that mountain. The goal here is to reach the top, to reach the goal, which is our home, that is our purpose. But religion also, when we say religion is realization, we also refer to the process. That is, there is a climbing of the mountain that's going on. There is an upward movement, and it requires It requires an effort for us to ascend that mountain path. And there is a big difference between the backpackers or the mountaineers on that path and the people maybe who live down in the valley. That is the worshipers of a conventional religion, who maybe they come out of their house in the morning and they look up at the mountain and they admire the mountain. And maybe if they're artists, maybe they'll come out and they'll paint a picture of the mountain, or they'll take a wonderful photographs of the mountain, or maybe even they'll do circumambulation of the mountain. All those things that's all part of one kind of religion, but that's quite different from the actual beginning, the actual ascent, the actual trudging up towards the top and doing the yoga and the sadhana and the spiritual practice that distinguishes a practitioner from a mere worshiper. So, Swami Vivekananda goes on to give us a clearer definition here of exactly what he means by religion is realization. When he says each soul is potentially divine, the goal is to manifest this divinity within by controlling nature, internal and external. You could do this either by, I'm quoting to you, by the way, a quotation here, famous quotation that all of you know from it appears for the first in the book of Raja Yoga, kind of summarizes the teaching of the Vedanta philosophy. So the goal is to do this either by work or by worship or psychic control or philosophy, by one or more of all of these, and be free. This is the whole of religion. And doctrines, dogmas, and temples, and books, and forms are but secondary details. That's the teaching. The goal here, he says, is to, each soul is potentially divine. The goal is to manifest this divinity within. Manifest is a good synonym for realization. Manifest also is like a Latin word there. It comes from manus, which means the hand. We talk here about it. So many words in English come from that stem of that word, the hand. To handle something. Can you handle something? To manipulate something? But to manifest something means to hold it in the hand, hold it out in your hand, so that it becomes clear and becomes obvious. And you remember how Swami Vivekananda in later days, seated in the garden under the banyan tree at Belur Math, talking about soul, God, and religion, and about Brahman, the absolute. And they're surrounded by some of even the direct disciples. They're hearing these high, lofty words. And Swami Premananda then asked him, "Oh, Swami, it's high, is speaking here, Brahman. It sounds so vast and so infinite, and so how can we understand it? It seems like it's almost impossible for us to understand it." And he has said, what? That he got into a spiritual mood. He said, what? Well, it's easy to understand. That he picked up a stone from the ground, and he held the stone there in his hand, and he said, here is the living Brahman. So everyone seeing that, they're stunned and amazed to see the kind of a high spiritual atmosphere. But what a strange statement, beholding that stone in his hand. And yet kind of this is the realization of what it means to realize the God is realization. That is, it has become real. What could be more real and intangible than a stone in your hand? Make it manifest is the word. So that's our goal here when we talk here. Religion is manifestation. Remember, Sri Ramakrishna tells us about a boy who lived in a village. His name was Padmalochan. They used to call him Podo for short. And he was kind of a mischievous boy. And while everyone else was working out in the rice fields one day, he went off and by himself and climbed up a hill. And he found there an old abandoned temple. And as you know, in India, there's thousands and millions of temples. And some of them are just, the image is removed and gradually it's just abandoned. People no longer, so like this was a temple. There were old plants and ashwata trees growing out of the side of the temple, dilapidated old building. And he walked up there and he saw this. He walked inside. What did he see? All the windows, everything covered with dirt and with dust. And there were bats on the ceiling. And bat droppings all over the floor and dirt everywhere. He walked around there. There he saw over near the shrine. Of course, the image had been removed. No one had visited there for years. But there he found there an old conch shell. Now the conch shell is a shell that's used to call people to worship. And he got in his mischievous little mind. He took up that shell and went outside in the front porch. And he blew the conch. And he blew it so loud that it was heard even in the villages far below. And all the people there, well, they'd finished their day's work and they heard that sound. And they think, well, maybe someone has restored the temple. Yes, maybe that the priest has come and they're doing worship. Oh, yes, let us get cleaned up and we're going to go up there. Time for hority. So the whole village now, they're so happy. They have something, they're going to go up, they wend their way up the hill and they get up there and what do they see? Well, looks like an old abandoned building. What? They walk up there and they come up there and look inside the temple. Who do they see in there? Padmalochan. Standing there, bats flying around, all dirt, dust everywhere on the floor, no image, and the elders of the village, well, they chastised him. Say, you foolish boy, here you blow the conch. You haven't restored the temple. You haven't installed any deity here. You haven't done any worship. How could you call us with that conch shell? And so they were very vexed with him. Returned disappointed to the village below. So we can see here that, well, religion, each soul is potentially divine. The goal is to manifest, keyword manifest. If Padmalochan was going to manifest something, then he should have done some karma yoga. Maybe he should have gotten some hammer and some nails, get a broom and cleaned up the church. Maybe if he was a bhakta, maybe he should have installed a deity there. Done some worship. Having done all that, if he had blown the conch, then the villagers would have been happy to see the temple. But as it was, he didn't make anything manifest. And when they got there, they realized that there was nothing there. So that no work had been done, no yoga had been practiced, that there hadn't been no progress had been made. And And so we can see that Padmalochan, he could have done some yoga. So the idea is, when he says here, religion is realization, means, it says there, do this either by work or by worship or by psychic control, that is Raja Yoga, or by philosophy, that is Jnana Yoga, to manifest this divinity. We may say, well, yeah, you can see how you could manifest it in a karma yoga and a bhakti yoga. How would you manifest it maybe in Jnana Yoga? That seems to be a little more difficult to kind of understand. But not really, because, well, the teaching of the Vedanta philosophy, that's the first thing that we hear. That you are, what is your true nature? That you are a divine immortal soul. You are not the body, you are not the mind. That you are already infinite. That you're already perfect. And hearing those words, teachings, the highest teaching, the Vedanta philosophy, that we give knowledge. That is, in all the other forms of yoga, we have to do something. That is, there's some karma. In Jnana Yoga, you don't have to do any karma. The tool here is knowledge. All you need is knowledge. You don't have to do any karma. And so, having heard the knowledge, now you've heard the knowledge. You're all students we're all students here of Indian philosophy. We've got the knowledge. So now we have the knowledge. And now all that we have to do is we have to manifest it. That is, we have to act upon it. And that should be no problem for us to do. In fact, it shouldn't even require any effort at all. Because if you're a student of read Plato, you read Socrates. Socrates used to teach his disciples that knowledge is virtue. That once you know what is true, once you know what is the right thing to do, that you will automatically do it. Your whole psyche will automatically do. If somebody knows that's poison, no one will eat the poison. And so knowledge is all that's needed for us to realize, to manifest that. Of course, it assumes something else we have to remember. It assumes you have to remember what in Vedanta, of course, is all about knowledge. That's what Vedanta means, knowledge. Vedanta means realization. But what does realization mean? Realization means knowledge plus character. That is, if you give the knowledge to a person of character, that means a person who has integrity, a person whose mind and heart and speech and actions are all in alignment, then as soon as he hears the teaching, he will be transformed. And if we've heard the teaching and we're not transformed, that means that we don't have the knowledge. Maybe we have what we think is the knowledge, we just have information. We've got to come to believe in the knowledge and to make the belief or that information. That's why it requires maybe a little bit of faith. But still the knowledge will do the work, will help us to manifest that. I remember the old television series. Well, it's 50 years ago, so maybe you don't remember it. But it was called The Millionaire. There was a billionaire. His name was John Beers Vertipton. And his hobby was to give away checks for $1 million, and then he'd follow the lives of the people. That was his hobby. So every episode opened the same way. The personal secretary would knock on the door of some suburban home, open the door, yes, I have your cashier's check for you for $1 million. And of course the door would slam in his face. You knock again. Yes, no, please just sign here. I want to give you this check. And the householder, the man, he would just take the check, and he'd sign that quickly. Then he'd take the check and just throw it on his sideboard there, and he'd go back to watching television. Later on, he'd have dinner, and he'd go up, and he's falling asleep at night, and you think, what did that man come to the door? How strange. Gave me that stupid phony check. He goes down there and he looks at it. Well, this looks pretty good. Says, I'm going to the bank tomorrow. Let me show it to the teller, which he does. How much money do you want? The teller says, well, can you give me $100? Well, yes, he gives him $100. As he goes out, he buys a toaster for his wife. Well, you can understand how the story develops, how gradually he realizes that he's a millionaire. But he's a millionaire. Well, the secretary said, yes, sir, you're now a millionaire, as soon as he had signed on the dotted line. But it took him a little while to have faith and to believe in it. And so there's just the knowledge. All he needed was the knowledge that he was a millionaire. And he needed to just hardly do any action at all in order to realize that truth. So let's go back to the teaching there of Swami Vivekananda. Each soul is potentially divine. The goal is to manifest the divinity within. And then he says there at the end there, he says, this is the whole of religion. That is, yoga is the whole of religion. And doctrines and dogmas and temples and books and forms are but secondary details. And that's kind of a very strong claim that he's making, certainly for students of religion, when he says there that doctrines and dogmas and books, that is, and holy scriptures, why they were considered to be the most sacred thing of all in religion, is the Bible, and is the Upanishads, and is the Vedic texts, and is the scriptures. That it's easy for us to think of religion as just kind of the first thing we think of is the study of the doctrines and the dogmas and those sacred books. And that kind of raises an interesting theme in the life of Sri Rama, the teachings of Ramakrishna. The whole life, of course, of Ramakrishna is the essence of the religion is realization. But Sri Ramakrishna, one of his favorite themes there is to contrast the sadhaka, that is the practitioner, the yogi, to contrast him with the shastri and the pandit, and what he used to call the dry pandit. Once there was a so-called dry pandit. He was a very proud and very vain, but he was very well versed in the scriptures, invited all across Calcutta to give lectures on the Vedic texts. One day he came down to the river Ganges, very proud and vain. He didn't wear just ordinary cloth, chadar, dhoti, dressed in expensive silk clothes. Carried under his right arm, he had a big, heavy Sanskrit tome with all of the Upanishads and commentaries and Vedas and everything are in that huge book. And on the other hand, he was puffing on an English cigarette. So he came down to the edge of the bank of the river and called to the boatman, "They'll take me across to Varanagar." "Yes, we want to." The boatman said, "Oh, no, sir. The forecast of the weather is very bad. We can't go out. It's too dangerous to go out on the river now. There's a storm brewing." "What?" says the pandit. He says, "Well, you must take me across. I have a lecture at 6 o'clock. The poor boatman, what could he do? They get into the boat and they ply out into the river, an old-fashioned days, small boat. The boatman had a long pole and he'd kind of pole his way out into the river. Meanwhile, the pundit sitting there in the boat, he looked down his nose at the boatman. He said, tell me, my dear sir, he said, have you ever studied Nyaya Vaisheshika logic systems? Oh, no, said the boatman. He said, no, I never learned to read. Oh, I'm so sorry, said the pundit. You never learned you're missing out on 25% of the joy of living. You don't know those. So saying, closed his eyes, began to puff on his cigarette, didn't notice now that the clouds now were becoming dark and heavy. Drops of rain were beginning to fall. Well, the pundit opened his eyes, looked down his nose at that poor boatman. He said, say, my dear sir, he said, have you ever studied Sankhya philosophy? You ever studied the Patanjali's yoga systems? Oh, no, sir. He said, I never went to school, never had time to become a learned scholar like yourself. Oh, I'm so sorry, said the pundit. He says, you don't know that? You don't know logic? You're missing out on 50% of the joy of living. So saying, he closed his eyes, puffing again on his English cigarette. About this time, the rain is starting to fall. The wind is blowing more stiffly. The boat is beginning to rock. The pundit opens his eyes. He looks down his nose. And he sees the poor boatman. He says, have you ever studied Purvamimamsa? Uttaramimamsa? No, sir. You don't even know Sanskrit? No, sir, I don't know Sanskrit. I never went to school. Oh, sorry, you missed out on 75% of the joy of living. So saying, he closed his eyes, began to puff on his cigarette again. By this time, the rain was falling, and the wind was blowing, and the thunder was rolling, and the lightning was flashing, and the boat was rocking back and forth. And then the boatman addressed the pundit. He said, revered sir, may I ask you a question? Do you know how to swim? The pundit looks around, swim? He said, no, I don't know how to swim. So, oh, well, I'm so sorry, revered sir, because you're about to miss out on 100% of the joy of living. And sure enough, the wind rocked back and forth. Sure enough, that boat overturned. And that poor boatman, he was able to swim to the other shore. But that proud pundit, he drowned in those muddy waters, and he was never heard of again. So, well, we can see in the story, what's our lesson? Our lesson here is that this poor boatman, it seems like he kind of knew the essentials. What is it that all the Vedas teach us? They're trying to teach us one thing only, and that is how to swim to the other shore, how to reach the other shore. That's the whole point. Somehow that boatman, he had learned the essence of the Vedas. He kind of realized the essential teachings of what the proud pundit merely had read about in books. So that's a lesson that we need to maybe remind us. The teachings of Ramakrishna and Vedanta, which is all, the word Vedanta means knowledge. Vedanta is all about knowledge, but it's not book knowledge. And once there was a famous thought experiment that's popular among the philosophers of mind, and it's called What Mary Knew. What Mary knew. Well, it seems that Mary was a world-renowned authority on, she's a world-renowned physicist. And her specialty, well, she lived a kind of a peculiar life. She was a recluse. And she lived in her house, she lived there, the curtains were drawn, and she'd lived there for 30, 40 years, and everything was kind of old black and white television. Her old computer was a black and white computer, and everything was kind of drab and black and white. That's all that she knew. And yet she was known as a physicist, a world authority on color and on the science of optics and the frequency and the amplitude and all that of wavelengths, and was consulted by all around people on the route all about the physics of optics. So she was a world authority. One day after 30 years, she decided, well, it's getting kind of boring living in here. I think I'll go out and take a walk in the garden. And it's just a thought experiment. That's why so she goes out, she opens the door, and she walks out. And what does she see? She walks through the garden. Oh, sun is shining, the birds are singing, and there she looks. What does she see? A big red rose. She'd never seen the color red before. All her life she'd lived in a black and white world. And how she was stunned and amazed to see there, stopped there, gasped, oh, the wonderful, she realized for the first time what red is. And so the question of the thought experiment, of course, the question that is raised, the point of the experiment is, Mary was a world authority on color and on color optics. She knew everything. So the question then is, when she saw the rose, what did Mary know? What did she know that she didn't already know? She already knew everything. And yet she had an immediate, direct experience. This is what they're pointing to. This points to religion as realization. That means it points to contrasting conceptual understanding with direct, immediate, personal experience. And, well, needless to say, they're not referring to a perceptual, sensual experience, although that's where else can we get an example for direct intuitive knowledge than direct perception? That's all we have. But that's why it's a metaphor for supersensuous, for superconscious experience. So we assume that's the case. So that's Mary. How much she knew, though. She had so much knowledge, so much conceptual knowledge. In fact, the books of Vedanta fill whole libraries, different kinds of study of comparative religion. And in fact, these books, the Holy Scriptures, are often compared to maps. It's a very helpful analogy for us to compare the scriptures of a religion to a map. And we know that if you go back and you learn about maps, you know how in the earliest days maps were so rare. What time is it anyhow?
It's 11:50, 10 minutes of 12.
Okay. The maps were so, you see the earliest maps of the world, they seem to be so quaint. And of course, these early cartographers, if we could call them that, they just had to rely on the reports of captains of sea voyages, and trade people who had gone, maybe the Silk Road to China, came back with descriptions of landforms. And thus they draw a map of the world. And so say such today, of course, as we know, that maps are, we've got infinitely farther than those early maps. But even today, if you're a backpacker or you're a mountain climber, you very quickly know that even if you have the best of the Geological Survey map in hand, that the map is not the territory. The big difference between the study of the scriptures and between scriptural knowledge and between the religion and the realization. And that's the maps. I remember long ago, you take a family, it's going to go on a family vacation. The first thing they do, they go over to AAA and they sit down with a personal advisor. And the personal advisor will bring out a big map, unfold the map of the United States. And yes, you're going to go, now you have 2 weeks. Let's trace your route. And he takes out a big red color marker and marks your route and all the places that you're so excited to see those in anticipation of realizing the things that you've read about. You want to see those places. There they are. You see them on the map. He's drawing that. But of course, after you leave the AAA, you got to go back home. You still have to pack your bags, and you have to pack the car. Then you have to get in the car, and you have to begin the journey. That is, you actually have to make the journey. You have to traverse the territory. That's the realization part. In order to realize those things which you wanted to see. If you don't make the trip, then it's all in vain. It's all useless. And you remember that famous painting of the American illustrator Norman Rockwell about the ticket master, the travel agent. He has a booth. And it's there in front of the booth. There's a booth, and there's the barred window. Behind the window is the agent, and he's selling tickets. But it's a very ironic picture because all of the people in line have a very happy look on their face. But as we look through the bars of that window, we see, well, over the window, there's a big sign that says, "Tickets to all places." And we look through the bars of that window, there we see that guy. He's a ticket master. He's the one who's selling all those tickets. He's not going anywhere. That's his life. So he doesn't get the realization. At least Mary, she got the realization at the end of her, after she had done all her study, all her work, she had a positive outcome. She realized what she had studied in all that time. And so similarly it is with the book's favorite theme of Sri Ramakrishna, contrasting the preaching and the practice. Scriptures are often compared with the menus that you get in a restaurant. Maybe you have a restaurant critic. He goes in with his family and they're going to have dinner. They sit down, the waitress brings the menu. And he picks up the menu. Well, they really look at the menu. They order their food. Meanwhile, the critic is examining this menu. He's mesmerized by how they've arranged, how they've described the foods, how they've arranged the pictures and the photography. Meanwhile, the family is eating. Bring the food. The family's eating. Meanwhile, the critic is still reading the menu, looking through and looking at the typeface, looking at the different fonts. Meanwhile, the family comes. They order their dessert. He's looking over. He finds a dessert menu. He's reading that. And then when when they're ready to leave, of course, he says, "Hey, wait! I'm still hungry. I haven't eaten anything." Yeah. The menu is not the same as the dinner, just as the map is not like the terrain. Sri Ramakrishna often used to compare the two words, jnana and vijnana. Jnana means knowledge. He says jnana means knowledge. Vijnana, of course, means full knowledge. To know that there is fire in wood, that's knowledge. But to gather wood and to make a fire and to get a pot and put water in the pot and to boil the water and put rice there and cook rice and to eat the rice, that's vijnana. That's vijnana vada. Well, that's why some people have referred to Ramakrishna's teaching as the Vijnana Vedanta. Well, we don't know about that, but let me conclude here with the famous analogy. Religion is realization. Two weary travelers on the road, on their way home, and there's a midday sun is burning, they're hungry, they're thirsty, and they come along the road, and what do they see? But opens before them a great green orchard, and it's the month of June, July, and there all of the mango trees are in full fruit. And there they come and they see all these mangoes on the trees. And they're so happy and they're so relieved. They go over and they enter into the gate. And, one of the men was a businessman. In fact, he was a greengrocer. He used to buy and sell fruits and vegetables. As soon as he saw those mangoes, he pulled out a calculator. And he began to calculate the number of trees in each row, the number of rows, how many mangoes approximately on each tree, how much each bushel of mangoes would bring in the market. Like this, he's computing his future results. Meanwhile, the other man, he just runs over to a tree, climbs up the tree, grabs a big, ripe, delicious mango, and he stuffs it into his mouth. So there he is, big smile on his face as he's eating that delicious mango. So that's kind of religion is realization. What is the orchard? Well, it's all about the tree. What is the tree? It's called the Ficus religiosa. That's called the Bo tree, the Bodhi tree. It's called the Ashwatha tree, people tree, the tree of knowledge, the tree of life. That is, it's the tree of life. That is, it bears fruits. Religion, this is an orchard. The orchard in the religion, there's fruits. The fruits are not physical fruits. They're not tangible, perceptual fruits. They're metaphysical. They're superconscious fruits. And you can eat though, you can enjoy though. The whole purpose is to eat those fruits, to have that immediate direct experience. Contrasted with that of that calculator who has the idea of a future. In the future, we can achieve the fruits. No, the teaching of Vedanta is that we can achieve jivan mukti, that is liberation, while we're living. That is that is the purpose of spiritual life. And that man in the tree eating those fruits, a direct, immediate experience of religion. That's the point, and that's the purpose, and that's the meaning of the teaching of Swami Vivekananda, that religion is realization.
We do have some announcements. The next week, our speaker will be Swami Mahayogananda, speaking on Vivekananda and the call of the soul. The following 2 weeks, we'll have the birthday celebrations for Swami Vivekananda and Swami Brahmananda. That's February 7th and 14th. In connection with Swami Vivekananda's birthday, every year we conduct a food drive for the hungry people of Los Angeles, recognizing in the spirit of Vivekananda that the divine itself is suffering in the hungry people, and so we offer them food. However, this year, due to the pandemic, we will not be collecting physical food. However, we will be collecting funds to donate to the Los Angeles Regional Food Bank, and that way we will be conducting the food drive this year. Swami Satyamayananda continues his meditation class this Wednesday at 10 a.m. After this, he will be conducting the class on Saturdays rather than Wednesdays. We thank Swami Vedarupananda for his talk, the Swami stays at Vivekananda House in South Pasadena, and invite him to give the closing chant.
Om Dyo Shanti Antariksha Shanti Prithivi Shanti Apa Shanti Oshadaya Shanti Vanaspataya Shanti Vishwe Deva Shanti Brahma Shanti Saravam Shanti Shantireva Shanti Same Shantirehi Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om, peace is in heaven, peace is on the earth, peace is in the sky and the waters. The herbs and plants and trees are full of peace. The gods are peaceful. May this eternal universal peace enter our souls and beings. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us all.